For 4 years, I planted dahlias every single spring. I watched them bloom all summer, and then, without fail, I lost every single one over the winter. I'd just leave them in the ground, and by spring the tubers were mush. I'd go out, buy new ones, and start the whole frustrating process over again. But this year, every dahlia I grew last summer is coming back, and they're actually bigger. I realized something pretty profound. I was throwing away something that was still alive, every single year. In this explainer, we're going to walk through exactly why this happens and, more importantly, how you can fix it.
Here's the part that genuinely surprised me. It isn't just dahlias. There's an entire category of plants in our gardens that we just treat as one-season annuals. We repurchase them every spring, assuming they've run their natural course. But they're actually perennials. They could be coming back to your garden for free year after year, completely on their own, if you just know the one crucial thing that has to happen before the first hard frost. To understand the solution, though, we first need to look at the mistakes.
I want to be honest about my own 4 years of failure, hopefully to save you some wasted money. That first year, I just assumed dahlias were disposable annuals, bloom once and done. The second year, I tried leaving them in the ground under a thick layer of mulch, but they rotted from the ground moisture. Year 3, I actually dug them up, but I stored them in a sealed plastic container in the garage. Trapped moisture rotted the entire batch. Year 4, I finally used the right open cardboard box, but I left it in a freezing spot, so I lost them to frost damage instead. 4 years, 4 distinctly different mistakes. And every single time I looked at those mushy, failed tubers in the spring and drew the exact same false conclusion. I told myself that dahlias just weren't worth the trouble. I figured my climate was wrong or I just didn't have the magic touch. So I accepted my fate and bought brand new tubers each spring. I completely wrote them off as a lost cause.
And then, one afternoon, I was talking to my neighbor, Frank. Frank has grown the exact same dahlia collection for over a decade without ever repurchasing a single tuber. When I explained my 4 years of frustration, he looked at me and asked one simple question. Are you curing them before you store them? I stood there for a moment, realizing I had absolutely no idea what that meant. It turned out to be the one crucial step I had skipped in all 4 failed years. And, as I soon learned, it was the actual underlying reason every single storage attempt had failed differently.
Let's break down what Frank explained, because it finally connected 4 years of different failures into one single missing cause. You see, a freshly dug tuber is still carrying a lot of surface moisture from the garden soil. And that surface moisture is exactly what causes rot and storage, completely regardless of what kind of container you use afterward. Curing simply means letting the dug tubers sit out, unwashed or only very lightly cleaned, in a cool, dry, well-ventilated spot for several days before they ever go into long-term storage. This deliberate pause allows the outer skin to dry and toughen slightly. It dramatically reduces the risk of rot, no matter what storage method comes next.
Suddenly, my past failures made perfect sense. This is exactly why my sealed plastic container failed in year 3. The tubers went in still carrying all that surface moisture. With nowhere for the moisture to go, they rotted, regardless of the container. And it's exactly why the open cardboard box in year 4, which was actually the right storage container, still failed. Curing solves the moisture problem, but it doesn't solve the cold problem. Once temperatures in that spot of the garage dropped low enough to freeze, the tubers were destroyed. Both conditions, moisture and temperature, have to be managed correctly at the exact same time.
Based on Frank's advice, there is a reliable 5-step system to ensure your plants survive the winter dormant and healthy. It isn't difficult, but it does require precision. Let's walk through it.
Step 1 is timing the dig. You need to wait until the first light frost of the season blackens the foliage of the plant. This isn't just about waiting for the weather to turn cold. That frost is a biological signal. It tells the plant that it is done for the season, ensuring the tubers have completely finished storing up energy for next year. Digging them up too early, while the plant is still actively growing and green, means you're putting smaller, far less developed tubers into storage. They simply won't have the energy reserves to survive the winter.
Step 2 is about digging carefully. You want to use a garden fork for this rather than a standard shovel. Start well back from the base of the plant to avoid accidentally slicing through the tuber clump itself. Your goal is to lift the entire clump gently out of the earth rather than yanking it up by the stems. This is critical because damaged, sliced, or broken tubers are far more likely to rot in storage, regardless of whether you do everything else correctly afterward. Take your time here.
Step 3 is the cure, the step almost everyone skips. Once they're out of the ground, gently knock or brush off the excess soil, but do not wash the tubers clean. A little residual dry soil is perfectly fine. Adding water from a hose right now is the exact opposite of what we want.
Lay the clump out in a single layer somewhere cool, dry, and completely out of direct sunlight for exactly 3 to 7 days. This allows that outer skin to dry out and toughen up. This single, unhurried step is the absolute difference between a storage container failing and succeeding. Step 4 is long-term storage, which only happens after the curing is completely finished. Pack the cured clumps in a container using a slightly breathable medium. Dry peat moss, vermiculite, or even plain wood shavings work incredibly well for this. You want to layer the tubers in the medium so they aren't touching each other directly. Keeping them physically separated slows the spread of rot, just in case any single tuber does happen to develop a problem over the winter.
Now, the environment for that storage container is just as important as what's inside it. You must store them somewhere consistently cool, ideally between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And critically, it must be somewhere that will not drop low enough to freeze on the coldest nights of the winter. An unheated garage that occasionally dips below freezing is simply not safe, as I learned the hard way. An insulated section of a garage, or a cool, dark corner of a basement, is usually the perfect spot.
Step 5 is the midwinter check. Somewhere around the halfway point of winter, usually late January or early February, go down and open up the container. You're looking for any tubers that are showing soft spots, mushiness, or mold. If you see one, remove it immediately before that moisture and rot can spread to the rest of the healthy clump. This single 5-minute check can literally save an entire batch from one bad tuber quietly ruining all the others. What makes this system so valuable is that it goes far beyond just dahlias. There are several common plants that people treat as disposable that this exact system saves. Gladiolus corms, canna lily rhizomes, and calla lily tubers all follow essentially the exact same curing then cool storage principle. There are only very minor differences in their ideal storage temperature and timing. If you've been repurchasing any of these plants every single spring, it's very likely because of this exact same missing step, not a sign that the plant itself is difficult to keep alive. If you follow this system, you might wonder what you should expect to see happening in that box over the winter months. The answer is absolutely nothing. You shouldn't see anything happen over winter at all. That is genuinely the goal. We want them dormant, quiet, and completely stable in storage. The system is designed to hit pause on their life cycle safely until the soil warms up again. The real moment of truth comes in the spring. Tubers that have been stored correctly typically come out feeling firm to the touch. They might be slightly shriveled or wrinkled at most, and they are completely ready to replant, often with visible new eyes already starting to form. On the other hand, tubers that failed the curing or storage process will be visibly soft, mushy, or completely moldy well before spring even arrives. Catching that during your midwinter check at least tells you early enough to source replacements rather than being unpleasantly surprised when you go to plant in April. Let's talk about the practical payoff here, because the financial weight of this is significant. Think about 4 years of buying new dahlia tubers every spring. At roughly $10 to $15 per tuber for even a modest collection, that adds up very quickly. It's a genuinely significant amount of money spent replacing something that was never actually disposable in the first place. You're effectively paying a yearly subscription fee for a plant you already own.
But this year, applying Frank's method, that exact same collection came back for the cost of just a few days of curing and an empty, cool corner of my basement. And here's the best part. I actually ended up with more tubers than I started with. Healthy clumps naturally divide into multiple new tubers over a growing season. So not only does your collection come back for free, it actively multiplies.
Looking back on all of this, Frank said something to me that has really stuck with me since. He pointed out that a lot of what we as gardeners treat as the plant just didn't make it is actually I didn't give it what it needed to make it. Those are two very different problems and they require very different solutions. It's about taking a quiet sort of responsibility for the conditions we provide rather than just blaming the plant for being difficult.
So mark your calendar for that first light frost. This year, try giving them exactly what they need to survive instead of writing them off as a loss. It makes you wonder what else in our gardens we've given up on entirely too soon. If you have a plant you've been buying year after year, let me know in the comments. And if this explainer helped you look at your garden a little differently today, please subscribe. Thank you for watching.